everyone here that's a communist is fine, and anyone that's not for communism is called a fascist and thrown off the roof. Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Popola here, and I wanted to do something a little different this Friday. We're a couple weeks out from the election. It was a big cultural moment, no doubt about it, and I've been thinking a lot about the cultural message that has been delivered, but also the challenges that we faced in our culture. So I've got an idea that I want to work through with you and get your feedback on, because I think it might be neat, but I also think it's probably got a lot of holes in it. And I know that if I put it on the internet, those of you that would like to poke holes will do so with diligence. So here we go. I'd like to propose that there's essentially three models of how to think about culture. When I say culture, what I'm really talking about is, what do we accept? What are the behaviors that are celebrated in our society or discouraged? And one way to think about this is along a graph. Now, I'm a bit of an econ nerd, so bear with me here. I got my Sharpie. The Y goes vertical, the X goes horizontal. And so along the X-axis, we're going to put a distribution of behaviors. Now, and along the Y-axis, up and down, I'm going to call this social acceptance. I think that the conflict of visions that has been going on in our culture is about what the shape of the curve of behaviors and social acceptance should be, and how to think about that. Now, most of the world throughout human history has had a fairly rigid structure. Not perfectly rigid, but I'm going to draw it for the sake of argument. And it looks a little something like this. There's this range of what's acceptable. Maybe it's mom and dad and kids. That's all right. Maybe it's a king and a queen lording over everyone, telling them what to do. All right? And if you're not down with the program, if you're not in the good graces of the accepted order, you're chucked right off the edge. That's it. You're either in the group or you're out. We are groupish, tribal creatures. It is how we evolved. It is how most of human history has gone. Tribal warfare, a certain degree of war of all against all. And we still see this in a lot of places around the world. For example, if you happen to be gay and you live in Iran, you're getting thrown off the building, literally. This is like a drawing of a thing that will actually happen. So I don't like that. I don't think that is great. Obviously, a lot of people agree. And so the response to this, or the perception of this, is a different graph. So this, the rigid building, and there's one variation of this, right? Which is sometimes it's not exactly a cliff, but it's a steep stair step. You could call this a caste system, like was in place in India or even in pre-modern England, right? You've got the king, you've got the king's court, you've got the knights, you've got the aristocracy, and then you've got the serfs. This is feudalism, looks something like the stair step. So you're not immediately either in or out, like in small tribes or in Iran, but you really feel it where you shift from high acceptance, high approval to low. In response to this was a movement, I would say, starting in the 19th century and really coming to full flower in the 20th. Which said, no. That distribution, I'm just going to put B along the bottom and SA along the top. This distribution where we judge, it shouldn't be like that at all. It should be like this, wherever you are along the distribution of different behaviors is fine. It's totally acceptable. There's actually nothing you can do that is more right or wrong than what I want to do. This is moral relativism. This is postmodernism. This is communism. Communism says social acceptance can take many forms, one of which is compensation. One way you can think about social acceptance in the society, status, is a kind of compensation. There are actually a lot of areas where people would rather have status than money. Academia is a great example of a place where status is often traded off for money, although frankly, they all still get paid too much relative to people who create a lot more value for others, but they aren't making the most money you can make in the society. And they're also, frankly, quite envious and jealous about that. That's a big reason why academics hate people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or the merchant class writ large. So they want to flatten out the distribution. Everything is fine. There is no way to be that is any more right or wrong than any other way to be. The problem that runs into is that while you could say it is a step in the right direction, as compared to being thrown off the building, the bottom of the social acceptance axis is obviously death. If you really aren't socially accepted, you get the death penalty in a lot of societies, including our own. So saying, look, we shouldn't be killing people, in fact, we shouldn't even be judging anyone, it sounds good. You know what's also on here? No shame, no discomfort. This is the graph of speech is violence, of everything should be normalized. That's what this is. The first problem it runs into, without even talking about reality or human nature, which is the biggest one, but the first one is simple hypocrisy. Because as we've seen, the people who want this, they use a lot of words for it, but they all mean the same thing. Justice, equity, inclusion. Hey, every behavior is included in this model of reality, in the postmodern utopia, the blank slate. The problem is, you can't actually do that. And multiple people have pointed this out. One of which is Herbert Marcuse, who noted that to maintain this vision, you end up with the same thing you were trying to escape, because you end up back here, because all that you really have now is everyone here that's a communist is fine, and anyone that's not for communism is called a fascist and thrown off the roof. That's cancel culture. That's the notion of repressive tolerance. We can't tolerate the intolerant. And the intolerant, by those who most stridently seek this, is anyone to the right of Bernie Sanders, including Bernie Sanders himself, actually. So that's problem number one with the blank slate postmodern utopians that are really the moral philosophical core of wokeism and cancel culture and all the stuff that I think we've been beaten over the head with ad nauseum, to the point of majorities of basically every single group voting for Donald Trump in 2024. I think that's the message I got from that is, you know what? You people talk about this, but really you're throwing us off the roof, and we're sick of it. We don't want this. This leads me to the idea that I think we have to really confront that comports with reality. I think it's best understood as the cultural bell curve. And that is to say that for any activity, there is going to be a distribution of what is and is not normal. That's where the idea of normalize comes from. What is accepted? What is the norm? Everything can't be the norm, by definition. I think we have to confront the reality that we end up with something that looks like this. This is the cultural bell curve. There is a set of activities up here that are the majority of behavior that we admire, that we celebrate, that we reward. And then there's stuff out here that we say, no, not, don't do that. And in the middle ground here is stuff that's like, more like you get the side eye, you do have a cost imposed. You are a little weird. You're a little different. You're a little awkward. You're the kooky cousin. So what am I talking about? Well, let's think of a couple different examples, all of which are going to be offensive to somebody. So buckle up. The first one I think is obvious. Sexual behavior. At the top is the thing that continues to make procreation possible. That is mom, dad, get married first, then have kids and stay together. Top of the social acceptance bell curve. It happens to also be the top of the human flourishing bell curve. If you do that, you will be happier than if you don't. Them's the facts. That is the most well-studied social science thing around. And a lot of the people that have studied it are lefty types who don't like the patriarchy, and they're forced to confront the fact that if you want happy, healthy kids, having mom and dad is optimal. Where does that leave everybody else that's not fitting into that? Well, you used to say if you didn't get married and you were a woman, you were a spinster and you're over here in the side-eye category. If you were gay or if you fell in love with someone of a different race, you used to be over here. You used to be in the ostracized, maybe even physically assaulted side of the spectrum. Now, over time, these norms change. And frankly, that's where all the action is in social evolution. You could call it progress or not, but that is the battle we all face. That is even the battle that the blank-slaters have asserted. See, that's what they were going after. They were going after, hey, you want to change your gender? You want to marry your dog? I'm not going to judge. It's all good, man. That's in the best kind of version of that, what they're going after. No one should feel shame for the thing they want to do. The problem is some people should feel shame for the thing they want to do. That's the facts. You're either going to have shame or you're going to have tyranny. That's the choice we face. That's what's so difficult about living in a diverse society of actual real human beings. Because for starters, real human beings actually end up looking something like this. We've got the norm, and then we've got the outliers. We've got, polygamy, and we've got divorce, and we've got gay marriage, which is not right at the top. It's a little, it used to be down here. Now it's more like here. Now, of course, if you work at Ogilvy and Mather or you watch typical commercials on television for some reason, I don't know why anybody's still doing that. Well, then, these two, they're at the top, man. They're every Jaguar ad you watch. And look, that's a kind of progress, but this is what reality actually looks like. And it's actually the way reality kind of should work, because so much of reality works that way. Before I move on from sexual mores, I got to address the worst example. The one that, frankly, as a sometimes uncouth South Philly guy, sends my head to dark places. And that is, out here is pedophilia. Out here is people who are truly deranged to the point of wanting things that are criminal, rapists, murderers. But in the sexual domain, rapists and pedophiles, they're out here. And what's creeped so many people out is that these folks have decided, under the guise of things like queer theory, that should be looked at differently, that we should even talk about it differently, that they're not child predators. They're minor attracted persons. This is what has been ripping our society apart, is delusion. I'm not saying we should lock this in stone. I'm just saying we shouldn't pretend it can't exist. A couple more examples before we wrap things up. In the domain of health, it's pretty obvious, and we've seen the example of the blank slate utopians going to war on reality. Behaviors, social acceptance. What is this? Well, in the realm of health, at the center here is fit and thin. Fit and thin. That's the facts. That's healthier. It's healthy to be thinner. It's healthy to be fit. I realize that people have all kinds of genetic forces at work that make it harder for some than others. But them's the facts. Right here is where the health is at. And it used to be where the social acceptability was at. There's two sides to this one, which is why I put this in the middle at that sort of median, the norm. On one side, you've got, I would say, too thin, right? Over here. This is anorexia. This is obsessive compulsive problems. This is all the creepy models that you see in Fashion Week that it's like, is this the, whose vision of attractiveness is this? It's men who don't like women who put that together. That's what's going on with that. So that's on one side. It's working out to the point of having such a low BMI that you're really unhealthy. And on the other side is obesity. This is another example of where these people have screwed our society over and wrecked the culture. I understand why. It doesn't feel good to be shamed for being overweight or for and as someone who has dear loved ones who have suffered with eating disorders, it doesn't feel great to have your body image be a mess and to hate yourself. I don't want you to hate yourself. I don't want you to be dealing with kids who are struggling with body image. But in pursuit of a world with no shame, we entered a world where during the pandemic, people felt uncomfortable talking about the fact that the overweight were more at risk from dying of COVID, that we could be healthy at any size. That's false. It's always going to be an open question. What should be the norm? This graph I've put together here, this social acceptance, this cultural bell curve, has a lot of opportunity for us to fight and disagree about what should be socially accepted. But what we have to do, I think, is make peace with the fact that there are things that should be socially acceptable and things that shouldn't be. This is what all of ethics and philosophy are about. This is what the great religions struggle and grapple with trying to teach us. What should we do and what shouldn't we do? And it can't all be legislated. When you get into the world of we are going to resolve all these things, we're going to turn our culture into this, into no shame, no norms, everything's fine, whatever floats your boat. That if that's our culture, our governance looks like this. That's what actually happens. Because when it doesn't work, the reaction to the failure ain't good. One more idea before we wrap it up. And that is a little different, but I think it's equally important. And that is not so much about behaviors as ideas. Now, I very much believe in the battle of ideas, that we should be able to entertain any idea, even the most atrocious ones. That's what free speech is all about. But there is, I think, a distribution here of what should be socially acceptable or not. And my proposition is for a curve that looks something like this. On the left, my left, is all things communism. It's all things communism. We tried it. It's mass murderous. It doesn't work. Communism, 0, 0. Communism, fascism is actually has fewer dead bodies associated with it than communism. Communism should be right here. We should be mostly exploring that in terms of why did this idea take hold? Why is it attractive, even though it's manifestly wrong and murderous, even though it can't work economically, even in theory, because of the problems of information and incentives that are baked into how we coordinate in a society? All of that stuff should mean that communism is over here. On the other extreme is anarchism. Now, why is anarchism not down to 0? Well, for me, anarchism at least acknowledges that knowledge is decentralized and dispersed, and that there is some fundamental sense in which people deserve to be left alone and make decisions for themselves. Anarchism says there should be no rulers. We should be free to decide for ourselves what we do, where we live, who we marry or not, all of it, everything. Everything should be decided voluntarily. Nobody's allowed to point a gun in your face and say, don't do that. Now, it should be at the fringe because there's never been a large-scale anarchist society. And yes, we have global anarchy. There's no global government. But what we really have is global panarchy because we have a planet of governments. Even so, still better than communism. And at the center, classical liberalism. This is fundamentally, properly understood, Americanism. It is the ideas that underpin the Bill of Rights and the Constitution, that all men are created equal, that we have rights that mean we should be treated equally by the state, but that we should also treat each other as having dignity and therefore shouldn't intrude in each other's lives and commit acts of aggression against each other. And the state exists to protect us from the worst angels of our nature. I think that that should be the most socially acceptable sort of political philosophy. And in a sane academic universe, most academics would be classical liberals. And communism would be studied as something akin to the theories of where fire comes from before science figured that out. And anarchism would be something for philosophy class to imagine a world that was perfectly morally voluntary, in which free will and moral choice guided everything. That's what I got. That's what I've been struggling with. I am someone who really deeply values individual liberty as an essential virtue. And so individual liberty actually can push you into a world that's kind of like this. And there is a world in which this is a better model. That world is what I call the rule of law. How should our government treat us as individuals? And I think equality under the law is great. I don't want our government treating each of us differently based on our characteristics. I think our government should look at us as citizens and as human beings and treat us all the same. But how we treat each other, how we talk to our kids about what is and is not right and acceptable, we're living in this world. This is what humanity looks like. Men and women on average are different. They're not different in ways that make us impossible to get along. We need each other. We are complementary to each other. In fact, our differences don't separate us so much that great men and great women can't swap roles. You can have very masculine women that achieve incredible things and very feminine men that achieve incredible things in the domains that on average men and women tend to dominate. But pretending that the sexes are this is going to turn us into something horrible. And so I think we have to live in this world. We have to be comfortable with it. I don't want the baseline of this to be death. I think a good society holds this to be true and says, no. What are you doing over there? What are you doing with kids? Get out of here. Into the prison you go. Oh, stealing from people, robbing from people, hurting people, killing people. Off to the box. treating people fair, treating people right, doing the right thing, being honest. We reward that. We reward those things. What do you think? What am I missing? Where does all of this fall apart? Help me understand this, because I think we have lost some of our shared understanding of right and wrong in this country. And we have a moment right now to grapple with it, I think, and to maybe find some new consensus. And I think our politics has rejected the blank slate. I think it has. I hope it has. It might be the best thing to come out of 2024. And I think we should take advantage of that to reset the conversation. So have at me in the comments. You know I'll be there waiting for you. And I hope you have a great weekend.